There was a moment. You didn't notice it. Not when it started, not when it got worse, not even now. Because if you did notice it, this wouldn't feel so familiar. You think you're trying. That's the part that makes this dangerous. You wake up with intention. You tell yourself, today will be different. You feel that small surge of control, like you're finally about to become the version of yourself you've been imagining for years. And then, nothing. Not failure, not collapse, just silence. A slow drift back into the same patterns, the same scrolling, the same distractions, the same unfinished thoughts that never turn into anything real. And the worst part? You can't even explain why. Because from the outside, it doesn't look like self-destruction. It looks like comfort. It looks like rest. It looks like taking a break. It looks like normal life. But something underneath you knows the truth. This isn't rest. This is decay. And you feel it in those quiet moments. When your phone is still. When the noise fades. When there's nothing left to distract you from yourself. That subtle pressure in your chest. That thought you try to ignore. Why am I like this? You've asked it before. Not out loud, not to anyone else, but internally, over and over again. Why do you start things you never finish? Why does everything feel heavy only when it matters? Why is it so easy to waste hours, but so hard to focus for 10 minutes? And the answer you've been avoiding is, you're not confused. You're aware, just not honest. Because deep down, you already know this isn't about laziness. Laziness is simple. This isn't simple. This is calculated. Your brain isn't broken. It's adapted. Adapted to a world where effort feels unnatural and escape feels automatic. And you didn't even realize when the shift happened. At some point, you stopped chasing things that matter. Not intentionally. It just became easier to chase things that feel good right now. And slowly, your entire identity started to reorganize itself around that. You didn't lose discipline. You replaced it with something quieter, something more comfortable, something that doesn't challenge you, but slowly removes you from who you could have been. Think about it. You don't avoid everything. You just avoid the things that would actually change your life. You can scroll for hours, watch endless content, consume information you'll never use. But the moment it's time to create something, your energy disappears. That's not random. That's conditioning. You've trained your brain to associate effort with resistance and comfort with reward. So now, every time you try to do something meaningful, your brain reacts like you're under threat. It doesn't feel like fear. It feels like tiredness, like disinterest, like I'll do it later. But later never comes, and you know that. That's why this hurts. Because you're not unaware of your potential. You've seen glimpses of it. Moments where you felt focused. Moments where things clicked. Moments where you thought, If I could just stay like this, everything would change. But you never stay there, and that's the pattern. You visit your potential, you don't live in it. And over time, that creates something dangerous. Not failure, not even regret, something worse. Acceptance. A quiet acceptance that this is just who you are. Someone who almost tries, someone who almost finishes, someone who almost becomes something, but never actually does. And once that belief sets in, you stop fighting. Not completely, just enough. Enough to stay functional. Enough to avoid total collapse. Enough to keep telling yourself you're still trying, but not enough to change anything. That's where most people get stuck. Not at the bottom, but in the middle. Comfortably uncomfortable. You're not suffering enough to force change, but you're not fulfilled enough to feel alive. So you exist in this loop, day after day, same thoughts, same habits, same quiet frustration you never fully confront. And here's the part no one tells you. This state is addictive because it protects you. If you never fully commit, you never fully fail. If you never go all in, you never have to face what happens if it doesn't work. So your brain keeps you here, half in, half out, safe. But safety has a cost. Every day you stay in this state, you lose something. Not time, that's obvious. Something deeper. Clarity, identity, direction. Because the longer you live like this, the harder it becomes to remember who you were before all of this started. Before the hesitation, before the overthinking, before the constant need for distraction. You weren't always like this. That's what makes this uncomfortable. There was a version of you that didn't need motivation, that didn't negotiate with itself, that didn't sit there arguing about whether to start. You just did things. Now, everything feels like a decision, and every decision feels heavy. That's not growth. That's fragmentation. You've split yourself into two versions, the one who wants more and the one who keeps you exactly where you are. And every day, they fight, quietly, internally, invisible to everyone else. The version of you that wants more says, start, focus, do something real. And the other version responds with, not now, later, just one more minute. And you listen to the second one, almost every time. Not because it's stronger, but because it's easier. And over time, easy becomes default. Default becomes identity. Identity becomes reality. That's how people wake up years later, in the same place, with the same thoughts, asking the same question. What happened to me? Nothing happened. That's the problem. No collapse, no dramatic failure, just a slow, quiet, unnoticed drift. And the scariest part? It still feels like there's time. That illusion keeps you stuck. Because as long as you believe you can change later, you won't change now. But later isn't the moment. It's a pattern. And you've been repeating it for longer than you realize. Look at your habits. Look at your days. Look at how easily you slip back into the same behaviors, even after promising yourself you wouldn't. That's not lack of discipline. That's programming. And right now, your programming is winning. Not aggressively, Not obviously, quietly, consistently. That's why this is hard to escape, because it doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like you. And when something feels like you stop questioning it. You start defending it, justifying it, normalizing it. I just work better under pressure. I'm just tired. I just need the right moment. But none of that changes the outcome. Because at the end of the day, you still didn't do the thing you said you would do. And that repetition, that gap between intention and action, that's where your identity is being rewritten. Not by what you want, but by what you actually do. And right now, your actions are proving something you don't want to admit, that you're more committed to comfort than to change. Not consciously, but consistently. And consistency is what shapes you, not intention. That's why this keeps happening. That's why nothing sticks. That's why every fresh start feels the same. Because you're trying to change outcomes without changing the system that creates them. And the system is internal. It's the way you respond to discomfort, the way you avoid effort, the way you prioritize immediate relief over long-term reality. Until that changes, nothing else will. Not your goals, not your habits, not your life. You'll just keep cycling through the same version of yourself with slightly different intentions. And eventually, even those intentions will fade. Because there's only so many times you can promise yourself something and break it before you stop believing yourself completely. And once that happens, you don't just lose discipline, you lose trust in yourself. That's when things get really quiet. No more big goals, no more strong intentions, no more belief that things could be different. Just routine, comfort, distraction, repeat. And from the outside, it looks fine. But internally, you know this isn't what you wanted. You know this isn't who you thought you'd become. You know there's something missing. You just don't know how to get it back. And maybe that's the point where most people stop trying. Not because they can't change, but because they've convinced themselves they won't. And once that belief settles in, it becomes permanent. Not because it's true, but because it's never challenged again. So the loop continues. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly in the background of your life. And if nothing interrupts it, it will stay there. Not for weeks, not for months, for years. Until one day, you look back and realize you didn't fail. You just never actually started.